Hey guys, welcome back to another video here on the RCexplained channel. This one's going to be an interesting one because we're going to be taking a look at a couple components that I've purchased for that plane that had the speed control blow up. I have a couple components that I ended up purchasing. One here is the brushless motor and the other is the speed control. Now with my specific setup, the only component that ended up getting destroyed on me in that last video is the speed control. However, I could not help myself to go ahead and actually upgrade from this specific motor here, which comes with that Carbon Cub, to this guy here. So as you can see, there is a size difference, a comparable size difference, where I'm actually going larger in the actual physical size, which ultimately means for us more power. Now it is a 60 size brushless motor, which tells us that it's roughly equivalent to a 60 size nitro engine. That's kind of where it gets its name from. And the big thing about this specific motor in comparison to the previous motor is that the previous motor ran and operated off of a 60 amp speed control, and the new motor that we have here operates off of an 80 amp recommended speed control. So here you can see it's the Avion Smart 80 amp brushless ESC. So not only am I super excited about the power difference between each one of the motors, but I'm also super excited to be able to try out one of these speed controls for the very first time. Now what's quite incredible about these speed controls is that they have the smart technology built right into them, which is going to allow me to take data from the speed control as it's measuring a bunch of data live in the airplane. It's going to be able to take that information and send it right to my radio, so I get that in real time. And obviously with the channel RC Explained, we love data. We like to know what's going on with our power systems, so this type of stuff does not happen. So a couple things for me to go and figure out before we get going with this installation. I'm going to have to figure out how to get this motor onto the airplane. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is that this plate here looks like it's going to be able to match up against the new motor. However, the only problem here is that this component right on the end that holds the shaft in place, I'm going to have to go and increase the size of the hole in order to do that. So I'm probably going to just use a Dremel and open up the diameter of this hole so that this can easily slip over that component. And then the next thing is I'm going to have to go and take that fastener and place it into the outer edges and into the airplane. So I'm not sure how much room I'll have, but it looks like I might be able to just barely squeak by. Just because of the size of the motor is so much larger than the previous one. So as you can see, you know, from the back plate here, there's quite a bit of room where you're able to get that screw and fastener in there and then into the airplane airframe. So that's one thing to figure out. Then the next thing that I need to figure out is my power situation. So I'm not a fan of having dual leads here. This is a lot of extra wire that's somewhat unnecessary. I do use bullet connectors on all of my power leads into the speed control. I'm actually pretty old school and use the same setup from about 2006, 5.5 millimeter bullet connectors. And what I do plan to do here is just to desolder this and desolder this guy, and I'm gonna take those leads completely off. I do not use any smart batteries, so I don't need to worry about the smaller lead that is included on these types of speed controls. So once all of this is gone, then I'm going to be able to put my bullet connectors on there, and I can fire this guy right inside the airplane, get that motor bolted up, and I should be good to go. And then I can go for the first test run and fire up just to see if all this stuff works. So super excited to go ahead and give this a shot. So let's go ahead and see what we can do with it. This would not be RC Explained without doing a quick kV test of our new motor that we're going to use. First thing we're going to do is we're going to measure the frequency or the RPM that we're actually spinning this at, and then we're going to switch over to the voltage so that we can measure the actual output that we get from a voltage perspective from this motor. From there we can go and throw that into our calculator in order to calculate the kV. So let's find out the RPM here that we're going to spin this up. I'm going to try and do this all with one hand on the camera and one hand on the tools. So let's give it a shot. Looks like we're coming out at about 161. There we go, we got that. So now we'll switch over to AC voltage so that we can get a voltage reading here. And we're gonna spin up the motor. I just wanna make sure that the wires are gonna be okay. I'm using that as the stop. So it locks it there, and then we spin this up full speed. There we go, we got our voltage and we got the RPM, so we can go and put that into the calculator and compute the kV of this. We should expect to see a kV here. Let's just spin this around. We should expect to see a kV of 470. That's what the spec is, and we'll see how close we can get. All right, we got one of the leads all soldered up and the heat shrink wrapping is on there. And here is the one solder joint that I made. So not the prettiest soldering job, but you know what? One nice hot blob of solder is gonna do the job. And then I have to figure out what I'm gonna do with these smart leads that run to a smart battery. I'm gonna have to figure out what to do with these. All I did so far is just put some heat shrink on the end, and then this one was actually slit in two spots. I'm not sure why. I think maybe when I was separating and pulling the cord out, I ended up cutting it, but I just ended up running a piece of heat shrink throughout the rest of that lead there. And I'm probably gonna just wrap it up and then tie it off somewhere within this area of the speed control. Yeah, so time to go and just run the heat shrink wrapping on this guy and then start to install this right into the plane. And now we're looking at a heat shrunk connector, and then I just went and started to machine some of this away. So some of the material has been removed, so now we got a decent amount of clearance all the way around, so that won't end up hitting. So that looks good. Next thing here is to end up mounting this into the plane utilizing this stock bracket on our new motor. So let's go ahead, figure out how that's gonna go and install it onto the plane. And here we're at the front of the airplane. We have the motor installed using that supplied bracket. I was able to get those screws past the motor. It was extremely tight actually. And we got the speed control installed right there in the bottom. Not a lot of room for the wires. This was a little bit challenging to get organized, but I feel like this is a pretty good installation for what it's worth. I don't think any of this loose wire here will have the ability to contact the motor up above. And then the last thing is I ended up setting it up with the receiver in there, and it looks like that the telemetry from that speed control will not send the information to my brand new telemetry Spectrum receiver. There's only two specific receivers that are going to work with this Avion ESC, and they're both 6-channel from what I understand, and that simply won't work for me. So it's a little disappointing that I won't be able to get the telemetry from this guy. Last thing to do here is to fire up that motor, see if it spins and works. Feels like we're able to get a really low idle. That feels very smooth. So everything seems to be working. Next thing that we're gonna do is just to install the front cowling, and this should be a done deal here. And there it is, guys. It's complete after a bunch of wrenching. We got the nose cone on as well as that cowl back on, and the assembly is now ready to fly. So there you have it. As always, like the video if you do. Don't forget to hit that sub button so that I can see you in that next video. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.